thanks for having me back. Every time I keep thinking I get canceled, but you keep inviting me back. So it's on you guys now. It's not on me. So pleasure to be back as always. I love this group, and I love this church in particular. This was the church when we first came to Canada. This was our church. There were cornfields across the street. Literally, there was nothing. I was 7 years old when I was ordained a chanter by Amber Weiss of blessed memory. God rest his soul. That man is a saint. So I remember this place very fondly every time I come. Let's get started. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, O Heavenly King, the Paraclete, the Spirit of truth, who is in every place and fills all, the treasure good and the giver of life, graciously come and be in us, purge away all blemish, and save our souls. Give ear to our hearts and our minds, O Lord, and help us to hear what you want us to hear. So, I've been asked to talk about St. Mark. It's not popular or anything in this church, is it? It's kind of obscure. That guy? Is he that guy? No. Yeah, well, we have an icon. It's not like he did anything for us, did he? Quite a bit, right? You'll notice my sarcasm. St. Mark, we owe so much to St. Mark. We owe so much to St. Mark. And the risk that he took to come to... Did you get my good side? Not yet? Okay. We owe so much to him. I think his story is known. But what I wanted to maybe do tonight is maybe take a little bit more of a spin on what are the themes of his life that we can take and apply to ourselves. And as always, I'm going to give the disclaimer. This might be the night I get canceled because I am going to call us out. I'm not calling us out because I'm immune to this. I am just as guilty. Because here's the thing. I'm very tired of talks. I said this to my father in confession the other day, and I said, I am so tired of talking. I love giving talks. I love hearing talks. But there's a point where if the talks we say don't lead to action, then this is called religious entertainment. I got nothing better to do on a Thursday night, so I come to church, hear some dude speak, and I go back to my regularly scheduled program. That's not right. The aim of everything we do, of every liturgy, of every gospel reading, of every sermon, at the end of the service, what happens? This is probably one of the most important parts of the service, and yet people are already halfway out the door when we do it. You guys know what it is? So what is the most important part of the liturgy? Communion. Right. No debate there. What is the second most important part of the liturgy?
Distribution.
Distribution of what? So that's part of communion. Okay. Is it the deacon singing? Off key usually? Nasally? No? No? What's that? Say it. The intensity is palpable. It's when Abuna blesses us by blessing us by throwing the water. What does that mean? Like, why? Is it because we're really dry in our sense of humor and he's making us sweat? That joke. No. It's because in the old church, when there were like a handful of people, the bishop would go around and put his hand on each member and say, go forth to whatever it is that you're doing and be Christ, which you have received in whatever it is that you do. Now, of course, as congregations got bigger, the church had to be more create, not just creative, but practical. So is not going to go on every single person and bless them. So we bless the water, much like we do in a house, for example, and there you go. It's my kids' favorite part of the liturgy. There's communion, there's the fighting over getting the urbana, and then there's the getting wet with what Abuna throws at us. And sometimes Abuna is extra generous with the water, and the kids really love that. Why am I mentioning this at the end of the day? Because this seemingly is a part that we forget, that at the end of communion, we are supposed to take what it is that we have received and then take it out into the world. To do with it something. To do with it something different. And the job of a Christian is to transform the world into paradise. And it starts with your home. Is your home paradise? Sometimes I'll quote Jordan Peterson quite a bit, but have you made your bed? Like, start with your room. Is your room paradise? Is your house paradise? Is your workplace paradise? If not, then we're not living a Christian life. This is why we're surrounded by these folks. And as we'll talk about tonight, St. Mark is very human. Very human. And we can learn a lot from his life. And we can get themes where I'm hoping tonight, by God's grace, that we all walk out of here tonight saying, how do I transform like St. Mark? But before we talk about St. Mark, I want to tell you a story. I love history, and I'm a bit of a nerd. And I like particularly Roman history. Because they're hilarious. They would kill everybody and then call it peace. It reminds me of somebody that I know lately these days. He likes the color orange. So in the year 43 BC, there was a place that the Romans set up in southern Gaul. Does anyone know what Gaul is today? France. Southern France, they developed a city, or set up a city called Lugdunum. Lugdunum was at the epicenter of three major areas, and it was established to be a place of commerce, economic growth. Now that Julius Caesar had conquered Gaul, it was kind of be part of an expansion of the empire. 200 years later, as it's grown, there was a group of Christians from Greece, or from Asia Minor rather, Greek Christians from Asia Minor, who were facing persecution, and they decided that it was in the best interest of their families and their children that they would immigrate west. And so they packed up their things and they went to Lugdunum. And they went to their bishop and they said, we don't want to leave without help, because Christ is at the center of who we are. We need help. Please make sure you ordain a bishop for us, and priests and deacons to come with us to this journey so that we can continue to live our Christian life, because there are pagans in there. Their bishop was some guy named Polycarp. He's not important, is he? Very important guy, right? He's the disciple of St. John the Beloved. And he's the one who's mentioned in the book of Revelation as the church, or the angel of the church of Smyrna. You can read about him. He's doing a fantastic job. So he ordains a man named Potheos to become their bishop, and with him was a young priest that he ordained named Irenaeus. Also not a very well-known guy. Does anyone know an Irenaeus as part of the church fathers? He ended up, Lugdunum, I'll give you a hint, is now known as the city of Lyon in France. So he became Irenaeus of Lyon. Guy you may hear about as part of the church fathers, right? He is one of the most prolific writers of the Christian church and Christian history. Now, why am I telling you this story? Because within 50 years of these Christians, with Saint Irenaeus, with Potheos, these guys coming and establishing themselves in southern France, the entirety of southern France became Christian. 50 years. 50. The Coptic Orthodox Church in Canada, and especially in southern Ontario, is plus or minus 50 years. Where are the Christians? Where are the converts? Belesh. Belesh. In the last 5 years, we have seen a surge in conversions to Orthodoxy. A surge, like the numbers are beyond. And I can tell you one of the main reasons, because I have a lot of Protestant friends who have, since COVID, have asked me, like at least, I've heard this at least 20 times. Something happened to us in COVID where we realized that our services are no different online versus in person. You guys are different. Tell me what's different. And I said, the difference is the Eucharist. The difference is that this isn't just about teach yourself Christianity. This is about being part of a tradition and a family that extends well past the New Testament into the religion of Israel. If there is a surge, are we seeing a surge? Let's be honest with ourselves. The answer is no. The answer is no. Not in this community. And not in most communities in southern Ontario. I have friends. I ask, is this happening where you are? No, it's not. The Christians who moved from Asia Minor to Lyon transformed what they needed to do to transform the culture. Now, I'm not asking, realistically speaking, that we're going to transform southern Ontario all into Christianity. But what are we doing in our lives to do so? We have to look at ourselves, because that is our task. That is what we are going to be held accountable to, is have we transformed the culture and the place and the interactions that we, as little Christs, and that's what a Christian is supposed to do. So let's bring it back to St. Mark. St. Mark is a prime example of somebody, a human being who has faults, who has problems, who's scared sometimes and doesn't know what to do, and who gets beyond it and goes and risks everything for the sake of Christ. And his whole mantra is encapsulated with what he wrote at the end of his gospel. This is Mark 16:15. Go into all the world and proclaim the good news to the whole creation. I would show you the quote, but you are a Mac church, so I'm so sorry. I can't show my PowerPoint. You'll have to take my word for it. I even made nice pictures for you guys too, and everything. Yeah. But what is the first theme that we want to take from St. Mark's life? One of the first things that we need to learn about St. Mark is that he's a man of action and a man who meets people where they are. Does anyone know the story of the initial interaction between St. Mark? What am I looking for?
It was his room that was in Last Supper.
It was his room. Well, it was his parents' house. But I'm specifically talking about an incident, an everyday occurrence, where Christianity spread in Egypt, the spark of it all. I wish there were. I don't understand why there aren't many icons of this in our church. Actually, I haven't seen any one icon of this. I would love to know where it is. Does anyone know the event that sparked Christianity in Egypt? Yes.
Is that with the shoemaker?
Yes. Anianus, Saint Anianus, who's the shoemaker, the cobbler. Okay. So can you give me a little bit about what happened?
I don't remember the whole story, but he said He must have hurt himself while making the shoe. It says on Joseph, he says, do you know what you just said? Do you know this truth, this God that you just proclaimed? And then he answered that. That's my theory.
Very good. So let's do a little bit of, drill down into a little bit of history. The book of Acts tells us that on the day of Pentecost, there were Jews in Jerusalem from everywhere, but particularly Egypt. Okay? There was a huge fleeing of especially rich Jews at the time of Jeremiah, when they knew the Babylonians were coming. Many of them who could afford it fled to Egypt. Okay? And they established a very big population. In fact, they had a temple in Egypt that was to mimic the temple in Jerusalem. It was kind of like a satellite temple in Egypt to mimic it. And so part of the first conversions to Christianity happened within the Jewish community by these individuals who witnessed the apostles on the day of Pentecost. They were called, actually, there's not much known about individuals, but they had a title to them, and they were called the healers, because God granted them, through the power of the Holy Spirit, power to work healing signs and wonders. So St. Mark, knowing that there is a large Jewish community, and by the way, his name is John Mark, if you read the book of Acts. Why does he have two names? Because he's cool and he wants to have a hyphenated name?
Parents' fault.
Sorry?
Parents were fighting.
It could be. It's always the parents' fault, right? But actually, it's much more practical than that. Most people had a Hebrew name, and most people also had a Greek name because of commerce. Like my dad, especially after September 11th, his name is Osama. So after September 11th, he went by Sam. Okay? But a lot of people also had practicality. St. Paul, his Jewish name is Saul, right? When he started going out to the rest of the world, he used his Greek name, Pavlos, Paul. Okay? St. Mark also had the same thing. His Hebrew name was John, right? But he also had a kind of local name in Greek, which was Marcus. So, as in Marcus Aurelius, or Mark. Okay? So that's why it's John Mark. Going back to this incident. A man suffers a workplace injury. He doesn't call the WSIB. What does he do? He calls on the one God in his pain. Right? Now, very likely this man was likely either interacting with or part of that Jewish community. Right? And St. Mark uses this very opportunity, this opportunity of pain, to meet him where he is, to tell him about Christ, and to heal him. Now, let me ask the group here. What are some examples of taking action to meet people where they are as Christians? For us. Let's be practical. Most of our lives are spent where? At work. Or at school. What are examples, practically? Let's be very practical, of meeting people where they are. Yes? Hospitals. Okay? Visiting people. But I don't go to a hospital every day. I go to work 5 days a week. You work from... Well, you know what? That's a reality. How are we, whether it's going to a hospital, whether it's going to work, where is this... Again, the throwing of the water. You're supposed to take the grace that you've received and now do something with it. What are we doing? Yes?
So when you're just having conversations with people, it happens all the time. There's a little bit of humility. Say if you know something, you don't be arrogant. So just different ways where you can try and be compassionate and empathize with people, literally where they are for purposes.
I love it, but we're tiptoeing around something. And you're not wrong. That's a great entrance. But what's next after that? Yes?
So my personal experience is that I would tend to water down my Christianity before. So they'd say, why are you on a dietary restriction? I'd be like, because I want to go vegan for 2 months.
I used to tell them it's bikini season, but nobody ever bought that.
But now I'll just, if they ask, I don't know, I'll straight tell them. Just because I find that it will cause conversation. And then if they understand a little bit more and they're able to, inquire.
I like that because you're being honest. For most of us, and I'll speak for myself because I don't know what goes on in your lives, but maybe there's some overlap with what I experience. A lot of times, I know that if I express my Christianity directly, I'm going to get a lot of backlash. And so I don't. I keep it to myself. And through my days at work, there's a lot of days where I'm just on conference call after conference call dealing with wonderful people. Okay? You collect a paycheck, you just move on with your life. But there are times where you brush up against pain, like Saint Enienus. When I brush up against pain, what is the mandate that Christ has given us? You have to remember this, because we take this as an allegory or just some sort of symbolism, but it's not real. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, cast out devils, and raise the dead. Not necessarily in that order. One of the things we're supposed to do is heal the sick. Now, of course, we have doctors who help with the physical, but we're not just talking about the physical here. St. Mark didn't hesitate to heal this man. And because he healed this man, it led to his conversion. Are we doing what we need to do to heal people? How do we heal people?
By praying for them.
By praying for them. Can I change one word in your answer? Do we have the audacity to pray with them? If somebody is in pain, when was the last time we prayed with them?
But where's the line?
Sorry?
Where's the line? Aren't we always, I don't know if this is wrong. Maybe we've been brainwashed. But isn't it always, excuse the expression, that's how it goes. No religion, no politics, no sex. That's kind of the broad lines.
That's the safe zone. That's the safe zone.
And that's kind of what everybody expects out of everyone.
That's what a good Canadian is expected to do. Talk about the weather, drink Tim Hortons, talk about the hockey game, don't talk about politics, don't talk about sex, and don't talk about religion. I'm not talking about religion. I'm not talking about politics. Can I pray with you? Sometimes we need a little shock and awe in our life to expose people to Christ. Now, I'm not saying go on the street. I hate it when people do that. I'm not saying you go out today and you're going to, every time you encounter somebody, can I pray with you? That's just annoying, right? But be practical. Here's somebody that is trusting you with pain. what can you do with it? You can hear, you can be empathetic, as, I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name. Ray, as Ray mentioned, that's the start. But if there is trust, why not say, I'll pray for you? Would you mind if I pray with you? Expose them to something they've never seen before. Because here's the thing, most of the pain that we're dealing with on a daily basis is not going to be cured by, I get you. There's a hotline you can call. We have the hotline. St. Mark, this is the thing. St. Mark could have risked it. In the Roman world, it was no different. Don't talk religion, don't talk politics. Right? Or if you talk religion, you talk all the gods. Everybody's good. That's not how we operate. I know that this is very much outside of our comfort zone. But if St. Mark didn't go outside his comfort zone, would we be Christians? Maybe. God could have used another means. But God, through his love, decided to choose St. Mark to do that. He was the vessel that he used. And God, through his love, is inviting each and every one of us to show acts of love with healing daily. So-and-so needs you to be there for them. So-and-so needs a visit to the hospital. So-and-so needs... What are we doing with these people? Are we just patting them on the back? Or are we bringing Christ's presence just like St. Mark did? This is food for thought. Let's talk about another theme. St. Mark was a man who learned from holy men. And I'm specifically talking about Saints Peter and Paul. One of the things people don't know or don't necessarily reflect on is that St. Peter had a very close relationship with his parents, with St. Mark's parents. And there's a bit of a weird chapter in the book of Acts where it says that St. Peter was imprisoned and the angel at night came and took him out of the prison, and he was about to get executed the next day, but he escaped, and he went to, the first place he went to was Mary's house. Who's Mary? St. Mark's mother. And then he kind of disappears for a little bit, and then he appears in Antioch. Okay? Now what the church historians say is that one of the things they probably told him was, you better get out of here. Like, you're in a heap of trouble. And so St. Peter went to different Jewish communities everywhere, Egypt being one of them. And it's said that one of the people that he took with him, probably as an interpreter, was St. Mark. And so St. Mark got a lot of the inside scoop of what happened in the inner circle of Christ directly from St. Peter. And so we as a church are just as much Rome as Rome and Antioch, what is called Petrine churches. We also are a Peter church through St. Mark. But St. Mark also had a fantastic uncle, a very encouraging uncle. His name was Saint... Anyone know his name? It's the Apostles' Fast, guys. Come on, we should know these guys. St. Barnabas. Right? That was his uncle. Some literature says his cousin, but whatever. Everybody was a cousin back then. It was his uncle. That's what most people say. And he took him with him, he encouraged another convert to come with him, St. Paul, and they went on their missionary journeys. And their first missionary journey, they took St. Mark with them. Now here's the other thing. Now he learned a lot about this from St. Mark. But what did St. Mark do on their journey? And this is another thing that is very clear about St. Mark, is that he made mistakes. What happened on that first missionary journey? They got to a place called Paphos, and then they sailed to a place called Perga, and then up and at 'em, St. Mark decides, I've had enough of this. This is too hard. I'm going back home. Maybe he missed his mama's cooking. Maybe he got homesick. Maybe he got sick and tired of how difficult things were. I don't know. But the man left. And when St. Paul and St. Barnabas came back and were about to go out again, St. Barnabas said, I want to bring Mark with me. And St. Paul basically said, heck no, he's not coming with us. I don't want this kid. I can't have this with me. We don't have time for this. This is serious business. And it created a massive rift between St. Paul and St. Barnabas. St. Barnabas ended up taking St. Mark to Cyprus. And St. Paul did his thing with Silas. And then Timothy and whatnot. Now the great thing is that something happened to St. Mark, and he tried his best to make amends with St. Paul later on in his life, and to also prove to him that he had grown and learned from his mistake. And we see this in throughout his writings. One writing is in Colossians, where he says, my fellow prisoner Aristarchus sends you his greeting, as does Mark, the cousin of Barnabas. In this case, he says the cousin. You have received instruction about him. If he comes to you, welcome him. So he's giving instruction to the Colossians. If St. Mark comes to you, you greet him. He's a good guy. He's a good kid. In 2 Timothy, this is close to the end of St. Paul's life. He says, only Luke is with me. Get Mark and bring him with you, because he is helpful to me in my ministry. So this is the end of his life. And it's said that St. Mark went to Rome as well to help him in the last period of his life and to strengthen the church. So not only was he a man who met people and was not afraid to talk about God and preach about Christ and met people where they are, but he's a man who learned from his mistakes and repented. We're all vulnerable. We all make mistakes. We sometimes, I don't know if it's the cheesy saint movies growing up, or it's the way we tell the stories in Sunday school, but sometimes we think that the lives of these men and women is just wow, they're amazing, they're perfect, they've got it all together, they figured it all out. They don't. They made lots of mistakes. They're humans. They wrestled with stuff. They argued with God. There was a lot of days where it was what on earth is happening in my life? Right? I don't know. Sometimes we have this picture of the saints being just so polished. But just like from St. Mark, we have to learn a very valuable lesson. That Christ is not afraid, knows we're going to fall. The issue isn't about falling. It's about getting up again. It's about repenting. It's about changing our lives. It's about learning from our mistakes, so that we can, like St. Mark, be useful to the ministry. Are we useful to the ministry of the church that we belong to? Another question to ponder. St. Mark also was an organized leader and evangelist. The word organized I want to underline here. Because the more churches I go to, the more I see this. And I'm not faulting anybody, but we seem to have an allergic reaction to organization. I don't know why. But St. Mark always left things in order. When he left Egypt so what is the first thing that he did? He had a vision. Okay, Saint Enianis gets baptized with his family. Some members of the Jewish community start becoming part of the Christian family. They start growing. They start meeting first in Saint Enianis' house. He had a vision we need a place to worship. So they had a place. They got a place. But before he left, when St. Paul needed him, he had ordained priests, He had ordained leaders and deacons and had organization for this new flourishing church in Egypt. And if we know the history, Christianity spread like wildfire in Egypt because of the organization and the footprint that St. Mark laid in Egypt. And when it came time to, when St. Peter, he found out that St. Peter died, one of the first things he did was, I need to codify what I picked up from him. And so he wrote down his gospel, which was the first gospel written down. And we know that it's St. Peter's kind of style because St. Peter doesn't mince words and he's just direct to the point. So is St. Mark's gospel. It's very, in fact, my father in confession, when I was very young, told me, and I say, what is the first thing I should read in the Bible? He's like, St. Mark. Why? Because it's short and to the point. He gets to the point. He was organized. He had a vision. He wanted to make sure that we are moving in that direction. And what is that direction? That this small pocket of Christians in Alexandria becomes a magnet to everybody to bring Christians in. And we grew. What are we doing to be organized and to live according to a vision? And that vision doesn't have to come from a bishop or a priest. You can govern that yourself. What is the vision for my life in Christ? That's something you need to be talking about with your father in confession. What are we doing? What are we doing here? How are we any different than the cultural community that's down the street? If that's all we're doing is just, this is a meeting place where we have programs and, fun stuff and services, and we're no different. But we are different. We have to have a vision for what that looks like. And then the last theme that I wanted to bring to the table, and then we can have an open discussion. St. Mark was a man who knowingly risked everything for Christ. And if you saw the PowerPoint, you'd see an icon of St. Mark's martyrdom. How did St. Mark die? He was dragged. Does anyone know the backstory of how St. Mark died? The circumstances surrounding his death.
The night of the resurrection, please. Who's dragged out of the ship?
By who? Do you remember? You're absolutely right.
No. What Pharaoh was taking care of each of them.
So there happened to be on that year, on the Feast of the Resurrection, on Passover. I don't know why we keep calling it Pascha. It's Passover. I wish we would just call it Passover. Stop being Greek and fancy. It's just Passover. Anyways, the resurrection night happens to coincide that year with a major festival of an Egyptian god named Serapis. And so these people leave the temple riled up and go take him from the church, and they drag him to his death. Now, St. Mark is not a foolish man. Probably knew that there was some, when two religions compete on the same day, sometimes people get a little bit heated. Did he take a low profile? Did he escape right after the service? Did he hide? Did he say, maybe let's cancel it and do it another day for the sake of everybody's safety? No. He risked it. And I want to bring that point up that you said about don't talk about these things. Because that is really what prevents us. Is that we take a look at a situation in which we are supposed to be the presence of God to the individuals that we are called to interact with, and we stop short. Why? I'll speak for myself, because it's uncomfortable and it's scary. What if I talk about Christ and they look at me funny? What if they report me to HR? What if they make fun of me? What if they reject it? What if I look like a fool? Is that the example of St. Mark? We've got to take a look at ourselves and say, what's preventing me from taking that audacious step of showing Christ's love to those who I come in contact with? And I want to have this as a discussion now, because if 50 years we haven't realized what the Lugdunum Christians realized, then that means we're holding back. Because guess what? The same Holy Spirit they had, we have. The same Eucharist they have, we have. The same sacraments they have, we have. So what's missing? What's missing? Yes?
Might sound like a cop-out answer, but there's some probably the truth. I'm not sure about the times back then, but every time period era has their own issues that they face. I think now people are just, even within themselves, are just scattered. They might not be able to focus in on spirituality in a general sense of the word, right? Need people's attention even preaching a sentence they can't because they're called on, for instance, right? So I don't think there's any real strength without that focus and without that dedication. So if they're trying to minister so fundamentally that they would be person themselves, that's something that issue. That's possible.
Maybe. So you're talking about extenuating circumstances outside of our control because of the culture.
I think it's within our control, but we decide to give up that control.
Okay. So let me ask you a question, because I love that point. And you tell me what you think. If people who are scattered and they realize that something is missing, as so many people do, if they saw somebody who had what they were missing, wouldn't they point it out?
Not always. They point out as in, I might notice it and I might admire to be like that, but again, some people with their back against the wall may change, some people surrender. So it's not every case, but there are some people that, yeah, they might point the finger and criticize and say they're entitled to this, or who knows what.
See, we do this all the time, and I bring this example up because one of the hallmarks of our culture today is the admiration and mimicking of people who have curated lives on social media. We call them influencers, right? Of various sorts. People want to mimic these people because they have the perception that these individuals have it together. Now, what do we usually discover about these individuals that are online? They don't. They don't. It was a big lie. Like, they have a very curated, marketing-centered life, and you don't get to see all of them. But when you encounter somebody who actually does, and who's still vulnerable and humble, when you encounter Christ through somebody, what happens? And let's not make this abstract. One of the reasons why I loved Emberwace and still love him to this day, and I was blessed enough that almost 20 years after the fact, he ordained me a reader in another church. Every time I talked to that man, I saw Christ. He meant a few words. He would sit, everybody would do their typical Egyptian thing. Everybody has an opinion, everybody's Pharaoh, everybody knows everything about everything, and everybody has an opinion. And he'd sit quiet. And then somebody would ask his opinion, and he'd give 3 words and it would shut everybody up. Why? Because when he spoke from a place of deep prayer and from a deep relationship with Christ. The man didn't need to say anything. He was always a joy to be around, right? He was a presence of Christ. Are we that? Like, I'm not talking about St. Mark, that's 2,000 years ago. Here's a bishop that was there. A bishop. Simple man. Simple man. Would come, look after us. He'd make sure that every time he came, he did home visits. I didn't grow up in Mississauga. I moved to Kitchener. And I grew up in Cambridge, and he would still make sure that he visited every time. I remember growing up, he would always ask the board and the priest there, okay, we need to make home visits. He loved being, he just was a pleasure. Are we that? Are we that? When people come in contact with us, do they see what they're missing? Or have we become, in an effort to survive in this world, become so much like the influences outside that people just don't see the difference anymore? Sometimes I look at myself and say, does anybody see the difference? We talk a lot, but do we act? What else is missing? We talked about fear. We talked about being a presence of Christ. What else is missing? Yes?
So someone brought up this point to me years ago. I love Coptic and liturgy, but someone brought it up. He said when St. Mark came to Egypt to preach, he did say, well, we need to take these Libyan traditions and we're going to speak Hebrew and we're going to do this and that. They didn't sing in a certain way. The Egyptians took the faith but kept their own traditions. And so I think that was part of what was so effective about it, was when you preach the truth, you didn't force, well, you need to pray like this.
You know what we would, the term we would use for that is he baptized the culture. He baptized the culture. Are we baptizing the culture? We've got people, the thing about Christianity and why it's stuck in so many different places is exactly what you said. When Christianity went in, they would go in and they would take the beautiful elements of the culture and incorporate it into the church service somehow. Now, we're not going to change the liturgy, because the liturgy is exactly the way we're taking stuff biblically from what God has given us of how we worship. Okay? This is my better side. But how are we bringing people in? What is the impression? Have you, I've had the fortunate or unfortunate experience sometimes of bringing people in from outside cultures to our church. And the feedback has been unanimous. This is heavy culture.
But how do you open the topic with them?
See, the thing is, I hated that answer. Because what I was hoping they would do would be to look at Christ. But what they got, their first impression, and I'm not saying this to fault anyone, okay? But there is heavy cultural baggage that people interact with. So how does somebody, and I don't believe that we have to necessarily create isolated churches just to cater to different demographics. We have to be a church that is willing to open and recognize that certain cultural elements may prevent people from coming in. But the objective isn't just to bring people in so that they become part of the team orthodoxy. And I always tell people this: orthodoxy did not die for you on the cross. Orthodoxy did not rise from the dead. It's Christ. The aim of all of this is to point people to God. I'm not talking about the service, I'm talking about the way we interact with each other. Does it bring people to Christ? Somebody said something to me the other day. He said, the most powerful tool of evangelism is coffee. Coffee. Not theological works, not whatever, coffee. And I said, I love it, tell me more. And he said, because during coffee hour, the churches who are able to get beyond the cliques and the cultural issues and actually go and talk to people are the ones who are capable of bringing people to Christ. Do we see the coffee hour, the social time, as time for evangelism? And we say, well, I don't see people outside of our community in coffee hour. Start with people in your community. How many people come that may be new to the church that you haven't seen? Who's saying hi to them? That's how we practice evangelism. Coffee. There's so many things, but culture is a big part of it. But we can't change all our culture, right? There is an element of culture here too. But it's transcending that culture and pointing them back to Christ. What else? This is your chance to be honest. Yes, sir.
I would like to add, I really like the approach they take, how to introduce Christ to the people around us. But there are other issues or other scenarios, in particular to our church and community. We live in isolation, big time. We are on the sidewalk like everybody walks on the street. In a way, we create our whole life within our churches, and we don't mingle as much, and we invest in our community. And we view ourselves as special, different from the people around us. So I'm not participating in any cultural issues, whether music, art, sports, anything else. We are not part of any stream, the mainstream in our culture. So we live in isolation. We don't have, once you isolate yourself, you're missing the tools to come to.
But you're protecting yourself. You're making a bubble, which is, again, with everything.
Let me finish.
Sorry,
Yes.
sorry.
So you miss the tools of communicating with people because you don't act with people as much as you should. That's one side. So we have to be active members in the society. In every field that we can, we have to view ourselves as active members in the society, not in isolation, and we create our own law. That's one. The other thing is, some factors comes to why we cannot communicate with people or introduce Christ to people. There are many factors, so just adding to what you have presented. One of it is with the challenges in faith. One of the main questions that stated in the book of Mark is, Jesus asked the disciples, what do you think who I am? Who I am? Right? And that's the core point of our faith. If we have that very strong faith in Christ and understand His message of salvation, we will be like a bullet. And this is what happened to the disciples. Mm-hmm. Because they have absorbed Christ completely and became like fire. We are not able to really grab and understand the fullness of Christ in our life to the point that you can go out and present it.
I love that point, and it's actually in one of my notes, because this is one of the points that I wanted to ask you guys. When I say Christ, because this is the gospel, okay? We are supposed to preach the gospel. Can you tell me in 2 sentences, what did Christ save us from? Great, what does that mean? What does that mean? That's abstract stuff. What does that mean? Yes?
He saved me from myself.
Say it again.
He saved me from myself.
If I understand, I love it. Thank you. We have a lot of Christians today, and I'm not picking on anybody. I love our brothers and sisters. I don't care what stripe they are. Okay? But there is, why am I Orthodox? Because we've preserved this understanding of the gospel that has somewhat been perturbed in other areas. What did Christ save us from? Is it some obscure thing that we violated and so we have to be punished? And so Christ came to save us from that? Is it some trait of God that He comes to save us from? No. We chose death. We chose to sin. We choose to be idolatrous. We choose to let garbage into our life, even though we have the choice to choose God. And if I don't believe that within my heart of hearts, then I am not going to fully realize why I'm here. Because if I don't recognize my filth, like I was teaching on Saturday for I have a university catechism class in another church. And I was telling them, and I'm saying, I'm open. I will be transparent with you all. There are times when after my wife has gone to bed and the kids are at bed and I'm laying there and I'm looking up. And I'm looking at myself. And I ask God, how do you put up with me? I can't even put up with me. The filth and the crap that goes through my mind every day. The stuff that just the utter garbage that I produce and say. And I come to Him and He heals me. I come to Him every Sunday and I get a blood transfusion. Because I chose death. I choose death regularly. If we're not seeing this in our lives, do you know what we replace it with? Exactly what Uncle said. We preserve our culture. We preserve ourselves. It's all about just maintaining the outward forms. And so that's all it's about. This is, we belong to a club. But if I truly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, if I truly come knowing that I need help, that Christ saves me from myself. He is my only hope. Because if it's left up to me, I am going to not be in a nice place. And He saves me. And He gives me hope. And He gives me life. And He gives me love. And He gives me an opportunity to be like Him despite all of my garbage. How can I not share that with somebody else? Just how? When I've been loved so much, how can I not share that? If I see somebody starving on the street and I've got food in my hand, like what audacity would I have if I didn't share it with him? I'm not talking about charity. This is the same thing. We have people outside who are starving, and I have all this love given to me. And what am I doing with it? I'm closing myself in as a community. I'm in my routine. I'm making myself comfortable. We have brilliant people in this room today. And this is my prayer and my hope and my request. You're all brilliant people, and this is a big congregation. There's a lot of really smart people. Are you telling me that we can't put our heads together to come up with something that invites people in and gets outside of our comfort zone while maintaining the integrity of our services? Or is that, as it was said, we don't feel the need to do so? Because if I feel that love, if I know that love, if I recognize that at the heart of the gospel, as St. Paul says, I am the chiefest of sinners, that I destroy so much if it's left up to me, if it wasn't for Christ, how can I not? How can I not? The excuse, you're shaking your head. Talk to me.
That's not how we were brought up. That's not what our church is about. I'm sorry, ever since we were 2. You don't talk to those people. You don't befriend those people. Your people is us. Our church is us. We bubble you in. We bubble your kids so when they grow up, they're sheltered, they're safe. We try our best as young parents to mimic the same thing that happened to us 25 years ago. Church only, church friends only, church community only. Yes, it's sort of not true, but that is how we were brought up to look at it.
So just because this generation, okay. I love your honesty.
This was hammered into us.
I love it.
It was a choice.
Because it's true.
We were brought up.
It's true. This is a generational. Where does this stem from?
Fear.
Where does it stem from?
Evil around us.
Coming from where?
The devil. I don't know.
Yes, but where? Let's be practical. Where did this come from?
The fact that we're not home, I guess, I don't know. The fact that we're not mutual anymore, where the plans are not safe, where the norms and values are not the same everywhere, and their parents wanted to shelter us to the best of their abilities, which I give them props for, to be honest. I'm not upset about this. I'm happy about this. I'm happy that we, in the middle of all of this, found, to whatever degree it is that everyone individually has, a good relationship with God, strong enough to have us here today, listening to this talk, working on ourselves on our individual level spiritually, and still wanting more, and still trying to fight up. And I've seen others who were not forced into this bubble, and how far they've strayed apart. I'm happy to be here in this bubble, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to put my kids in this bubble too.
I love the honesty. There's hands. Go for it.
I was going to say that bubble, again, talking comfort zone, I was always told that it's not like a right thing to question faith. You can ask questions. So in that regard, yeah, we have this bubble for safe or whatever, but again, to have a question that are we really? There's a lot of times where they challenge, they ask why this, and they have, as you said earlier on, they have confrontations or they're questioning, angry with God and everything they say, and that helps them. So our bubble, the way the parents talk, they're the same parents that, they were gonna go swim in the sea and then something happened when they were 3 years old and the rest of their life they're free. And then they carry that and they're scared of everything. Like, they're not perfect. They do their best, but they can go off. And we should have, again, with the intelligence, not just IQ, but with street smarts, EQ, whatever. We should question these things because maybe that way that they've lived in their experiences and what they had to deal with back home isn't necessarily the best thing, not only for us, but in our situation, our culture, and to get the best out of what we can.
Carol, go ahead.
So I have to disagree with you guys. I think we're being a little bit too harsh on the church. I'm not someone who really grew up in the church too much, to be honest. I go to church a lot. I don't like Egyptians. I think the first Egyptian friend I made, I was like 12.
We love you though.
But I hated Egyptians. Legitimately, that's my mom. I would tell my mom. So I grew up playing hockey. I only had Canadian friends. That being said, I started coming to the church for a different reason. And I can tell you the reason why people aren't going to church isn't because we're not inviting enough. Because my grade 8 teacher had a test back. And he didn't know what it was. He was like, what is this? But some Egyptian gave, like, we were sharing things with people, and it's not that we're not being invited, we just weren't accepted. And now that could have been cultural, whatever. But what I will say is, I had the fortune, I play ice hockey, still play today. I had the fortune of playing, I was on an all-Egyptian team.
Wait, are you telling me that there's enough of a bench?
Actually,
to-
so
I love it.
Abuna Thomas from SMSB was on our team for a couple of games, and his son Mateo was on our team. And he was telling me as part of his ministry, he coaches, and he said he would bring the church to SMSB, and they would learn about Christianity.
I mean the hockey team to
The
SMS?
hockey team, not our hockey team, like the kids.
The kids, yeah.
He coaches. So when we say ministry, it's just like you said, meeting them where they are. But I think we're being a little bit too hard on the Egyptians and say, well, it's a bubble.
Here's the thing that I want us to reflect on. The Egyptian church, from its inception, has always been a church that brings Christ to wherever they go, not for the sake of bringing people in, but bringing Christ to wherever they go. And Christianity spread throughout Egypt and throughout Africa because of what St. Mark did. Okay? Then we had to face Islam. And that was something that you're not allowed to talk about things. Our parents' generation, my parents' generation came here, and this is how they grew up. They don't know how to talk about these things. Like, you don't preach these things. It's all about preservation. It's all about preservation. And that's great. But within 2 generations, it is no longer great. And you need to start going back to what we've been given, this freedom to affect the culture. We have a prerogative to transform. We have a mandate to transform. Now that transformation is not going to be preserving a bubble. It's also not going to be being the crazy guy on the street corner and, doing tasbih in your tonya on the street corner. Like, good for you if you do that. I can't do that. So there's something else that's part of it. Like, we are to go beyond our safe zone. Now, I'm not picking on you.
No. Please, I love being challenged.
It's not about being challenged. It's about looking at it from the perspective of St. Mark. And that is the whole point of our discussion today. Is that each one of us, what that looks like, it's what Giro said, right? It's not about having, we have cultural festivals all over the city. I think we just had one. Did we not just have one very recently? Okay. That's great. We organize, we do these things. But I'm talking about, okay, sometimes I want to bring a friend to church. What is the pathway for us as just average Joes to bring people to church? You talk about, a lot of it has been haphazard. So a teacher gets introduced to tasbih, or some guy comes to Vespers, or most people, most kids I talk to, don't know what to do with that. I have a friend, I want to bring them to church. What should I do? Because a 3-hour liturgy is hard. And I always tell them the liturgy is not for people, it's called the liturgy of the faithful for a reason. It's not meant for evangelism. You got to break the ice somehow. Sorry for the hockey pun. See, I grew up playing hockey too. Same idea. I didn't have a ton of Egyptians around. My wife is not Egyptian. Some of you know that, right? So, part of the challenge is, how do we break the ice with people? And part of it, and the ice that we need to break, is how do I bring them to Him? We need to figure out a way to make that happen. Maybe a group like this is a nice way of breaking the ice. Maybe there's an element of that. Right? Uncle, you had your hand up. I'm sorry. What?
I just wanted to add one thing. Jesus was a capturing character with his behavior and the way he talks. And all the disciples have this capturing character because they have that faith. Conduct, the conduct is everything. The way we act and interact with people, coming out from Christian faith, is the way we attract people to us. And that will pave the way for us to talk to them. I just want to tell you, in my prison work, I met a person. I don't know his faith, but what a character. The person, the way he talks with people, comfort people, listening, you know what I mean? Make everything simple and easy. If you have a problem, you spend the time and never ask him what he believes in, and he never told me what he believes in. And that always comes to my mind. How can we deal with people with the same way that we become an attractive person, comfortable person around us? And this is the first step to invite people over. That's what I'm talking about. This is the point I'd like to make.
I agree, and it starts there. But invite them to come here. You mentioned, on that point, I don't know your name, I'm sorry.
Her?
Yes.
Maurice.
You mentioned people outside the bubble who have fallen away from the faith or the church. You know what the difference is? Because I've had many. One of the main core differences is that he wasn't the center. It's not keeping the bubble and keeping things safe and kosher and contained is great for, that preservation even on the surface level. But that's not what we're supposed to do. Now, if Christ is not at the center of what we do, if we rebel against that preservation, the preservation is better. But the question, I think what we're all trying to get at is there an evolution? Is there a growth? Is there something that we need to be aspiring to? Because everywhere I go, people are challenging the bubble within our community. Because if I look to the life of St. Mark, we're not supposed to. He wasn't in a bubble. Neither were the Christians. That's not how our church was for hundreds of years. But it became part of a bubble to just survive. You ever hear the expression, I'm just surviving, I'm not thriving, I'm just surviving? That has been our church for the last 1,500 years. 1,700 years. What am I talking about? It's just been about surviving. And we don't know how to get rid of that, and to what? What are we doing in its place? And that's what I'm challenging, hoping everybody to. I don't have the answers. I don't have a manual that I can say, here, do X, Y, Z. Every church is going to have to figure it out. But it starts with this, because there is a necessity. Your children and your children's children are going to be demanding more than just the bubble. Whether we like it or not, the bubble cannot contain us anymore. Because the bubble that worked in Egypt to preserve us cannot work here. And that's just it's hard fact. It's hard fact. And it scares me. It scares me because what are we preserving? Are we preserving our love for Him? Or are we preserving what we do? Has that become the idol? And part of us that we need to challenge ourselves with is understanding why are we in this preservation mode to begin with? There's a passage in the Old Testament that I use whenever I'm talking to kids all the time who've seen trauma. You ever know the story of the serpents who bit the Israelites? So a bunch of the Israelites start really the Bible says murmuring, but basically rebelling against Moses and Aaron and God. And so God sends these snakes that bite them. And a bunch of people died. And so God tells Moses, okay, Moses intercedes on behalf of the people. God says, okay, I want you to set up a pole with a horizontal branch, basically, made of bronze, with a serpent on top of the pole. Okay? It was a symbol of the cross. Because that thing, that instrument of death, became the source of life for us. But the strangest thing is not him building that. The strangest thing was that God tells Moses, and tell the children of Israel, for anyone who's been bitten by the snakes, if they look at that serpent, they will be healed. Now we can talk about the theology of this till we're blue in the face, but from a psychoanalysis standpoint, from just a psychological standpoint, what is happening here? Jordan Peterson talks about this, and it's very revelatory. He says, from a psychoanalytical standpoint, in order for us to get over trauma, in order for us to get over the thing that's preventing us from moving further, we have to, in a safe environment, take a look at the thing that has caused us the trauma and to work through it. The Coptic Church has been dealing with persecution from the beginning. And we have been in self-preservation mode for 1700 years. This is all we know generationally, is survive. And we've done a great job of it. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yes, no. The problem when people outside, we have to be working with myself. I'm Egyptian and I love my country. But what I want by my country is people judging me, judging anyone. Why are you judging? Who are you judging? Who are you? And they go to a fight. And you know, sometimes like he's trying to see me from inside or see anyone from inside. But the pastor, like, I don't, but seriously, I don't love the pastor because we don't think the food is peak.
I love that.
You know what I mean? We are always too good and we are right now. I was talking to my friend. In this generation, we are not the generation who hurts food. You know, like my grandma's generation, like, it's so naughty. People looked each other down from the heart.
Yes.
They never saw you if you're engineer. I should treat you this way. If you're people leave out our problem these days, or my problem that people would say words and love. Sorry, like, what you mean, please take 2 seconds before you open your mouth. We don't think anymore. Hello, we say a word whether it's gonna hurt. I'm just gonna say it. And then we talk about God and Christ that we had church with ourselves. You know what I mean?
100%. And that's, I mean, what you're bringing up is an incredible point that we need to be.
I'm sorry, but
There's no need to be sorry.
But this is what I see right now. Like,
You're right.
yeah.
And that's my point, is that at the heart of all of this is that we're lacking love. We need to show love. We're lacking these things. We need to we need to shore up the things that we're lacking. But part of it, let's summarize this. Yes, and that's very wise.
I really like some would ask me questions and like, you know, keep things before you ask questions. You know what I mean?
Yes, I do. And that's at the heart of all of this, is that the transformation that needs to take place has to start within ourselves first. But let's not keep it to ourselves only. And that's what we need, and that's my hope for tonight. Honestly, the one thing I'd love for us to take away from tonight is that, yes, we are here to struggle. Yes, we are here to be transformed and to love each other again, because our culture doesn't love. You mentioned our grandparents.
Yeah.
They loved each other more because they had to be involved in each other's lives more.
And they never like, I remember my grandmother before she passed away.
But there's one thing though I want to challenge on. Because now that my grandmother, like, God bless her, she's 93, she's got dementia, she doesn't have a filter anymore. She speaks the way she is. A lot of the things that we thought were so intertwined and loving actually was not as clean as they thought. But what I'm trying to say is, we have a lot of work to do on ourselves. We have a lot of work to do as a community. We have a lot of work to do in our jobs, in our whatever, to live up to the legacy of St. Mark. Because saying that we're the children of St. Mark, I'm sorry, just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't cut it. St. Mark is an example that we are supposed to follow after. Yes, we need to repent and transform, and we talked about this. He learned from his mistakes. But the other part of it too is, why do people fall away? Is because they're no longer part of a community that is evolving. And that's what we need to be working towards, in community. Because we are supposed to be doing this. We are supposed to be setting an example of what's missing in the culture. The love that's missing in the culture. The presence of Christ in this culture. People in this culture have been living off the fumes of the Christianity they inherited. And that's why they can do things like lobby and whatnot and go woke. Because at the heart of it, where is all of this come from, this human justice and all of that? It's from Christianity. They've just perverted it somehow. But we're at a point right now where, as a church, as individuals that make up the church, we've got to take a look at ourselves. Me first and foremost. Am I leading people to Christ or not? Am I living up to the legacy of St. Mark? Am I living up to the measure of my Father, who I say is my Father, and who brought us Christianity by the grace of God? Let's stop the self-preservation, at least at an individual level. There's certain things we can't control. But let's see, put your heads together. A lot of smart people. How do we bring people in? What can we help? How can we help people see Christ in our congregations more readily? And I think if we look at the example of I'll leave you guys with this thought. The Christians from Laguna, the ones I told you about at the beginning, were not theologians. Most of them were business people. They immigrated to the West, and they put their faith first. They put Christ first. Not in just some obscure concept or preserving their Greek heritage. Christ was at the center of everything that they did. And because of that, they transformed the culture around them. We're no different. We're no different. The same Holy Spirit that worked in them is the same Holy Spirit that we pray inspire us today. Thank you. I'd say, are there any questions? But I think y'all, yeah, y'all answered. And Tony left. He just left me. But are there any other thoughts or questions? No? All right.
I got some questions.
All right. Cool. I'll give you the mic.
Yes. Thank you.
You're
That was beautiful. Pretty intense, and you've given us a lot of food for thought.
That's what I do. Pleasure, guys. Thank you.
I'm going to transport you guys now to St.